Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the FinTech Hunting Podcast. We have an absolutely amazing guest for you today. She's an industry thought leader, a leading sales expert. She specializes in industry partnerships and collaboration. Please help me welcome to the show Denese Carty, Senior Lending Manager, Executive Director of Southeast Chase Bank. Denese, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. That makes me sound really old, Michael.
Well, you can see that when I got in the industry, I actually had hair and it wasn't gray, so don't feel old at all. But it is a delight to have you. You have a wealth of knowledge and expertise. We share a lot of the same connections. I know we were just talking prior to jumping on about one of the episodes you watched with Raquel. So I'll kind of turn that over to you and we can kick off the show right there.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on. I know that my daughter has actually been on your show, and I was very jealous. So thank you for having me on. I was watching your episodes a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or so ago, and Raquel Bora was on. And I adore her. I was introduced to her through Zoom about a year ago. And she just brings so much energy and she's awesome. But in your episode, she talked about how she felt that when she came into the mortgage business, there was an expectation on the way that a woman interacted in the mortgage business, in the way a woman would dress, what women were expected to kind of say and do, and how we would interact. And I really resonated with that. And I started in the business in 1990. And in 1990, back in those days, I had to wear a skirt. You could not wear pants to work. And I started at a mortgage company, and you could not come to the office without pantyhose on as a woman. And it never even questioned. It's just the way it was. It's just the way the world worked back then. And there were certain expectations of a woman in the workplace. And we were kind of taught, like, don't talk loud because it comes across that you're being bitchy, but be aggressive because you don't want to come across as being weak. And there were all these
mixed signals.
Yes, and instructions. And, we all tried really hard to be what they expected us to be. And as I was listening to Raquel, I was reminded of those conversations. And she said it was really hard and she didn't want to be that person. And she struggled just being herself. And I got choked up because when my daughter, who's now 25, got in the business about 18 months, 2 years ago, Raquel was one of the very first women that she met. And she met her at an IMB event out in California. And when she called me, my daughter and I talk like 10 times a day. But, I'm exaggerating, but I pretty much know, everything she's doing. And she called to tell me about this wonderful woman that she had met and that she was fun and beautiful. She kept saying, Mom, she's so pretty. And she was so welcoming to my daughter, who was brand new to the industry. And Raquel was just herself. And Allie loved that. And what that did was that gave Allie permission to be herself. So the next generation gets to come into the industry and be their genuine self, because women like Raquel are their genuine self. And
I love it.
And that was just really important. And for those of you that know Raquel, when you see her, say thank you for me. I've said thank you to her, and I really appreciate her. And Michael, I appreciate you having her on and having that conversation.
I think the world of her. And so anytime I can give a shout out to her, it is well deserved. That genuineness, that authentic Raquel is really more of the magic we need to continue to see in this industry. So let's talk about it. We've both been in the industry for a while. How about we leave it at that? We don't need to talk about decades or anything like that.
Done.
Talk to me about, because you're a sales expert and you've managed groups of people, hundreds of individuals, how has sales in lending changed over the years?
Wow. That's kind of a loaded question. That's kind of open-ended on all the ways that it's changed. I think sales at the end of the day, if you just get to the root of what true sales is, it's really just uncovering a need and asking second and third level questions to uncover deeper needs of the client, and then trying to determine if you have the products and the process and the program that can fit that client's need, right? So I was raised in a sales environment that was not sell at all cost. It was not hardcore sell. It was go find the clients that need what we're offering. We offer a good product. We give money away for a living, for goodness sake, right? um, and go find the folks that need it. And as you talk to people, if they don't need what we have, move on. Go to the next one. And so I think that is as true today as it was 35 years ago. But what has changed for our industry is how we get to that consumer and how those conversations come about. Michael, I don't know how long you've been doing this, but when I started, the consumer only had access to the interest rate through the newspaper on Sunday mornings. They could open up the newspaper and they could see what the weekly interest rate was to get a mortgage. Now, that interest rate would change throughout the week, maybe once or twice, right?
Yep.
So the reality was a customer had no way of knowing what the rate was. And the rate conversation was nowhere near what it is today. And that has changed dramatically, along with other things. But I think you have to really understand how to sell value and not just price.
So just to let you know, when I got in the industry, only executives at the company were allowed access to the internet because bandwidth was too expensive. And they were still worried about what are people going to do on the internet, and they're not going to work, and they're going to be doing all of this other stuff. Very similar to a lot of the discussions I hear about AI now. It's really not that. I don't know how it's going to be used. People may use it inappropriately. You got to have some guardrails. But I agree with you when you talk about selling. Some of the fundamentals, in my opinion, never change. Whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, you want to foster and grow a relationship. Discovery is really at the essence of what you were talking about. And I think it's one of the areas that really separates the people that are very good at their craft in the mortgage industry today and the ones that are still struggling, that haven't closed many deals this year, is they don't know how to properly do discovery and really find out what is that need. What is that? And for too long of the industry, we focused far too much on just a transaction instead of building relationships. And if you're focused on building the relationship, you'll give good advice. And if you don't have the best offering for what they need today, maybe they'll come back another time.
Right. That's right. So we already determined that you are younger than me because I worked for 5 years when there was no internet.
Okay.
And
So we're pretty close, though. Let's just leave it at that.
So right as the internet was starting to roll out is when Fannie Mae built Desktop Underwriter.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough to be one of the two originators in the state of Florida to pilot Fannie. I was with a company called Norwest.
Okay.
And they came to myself and a gentleman named Frank Fontanetta. So for any of those of you in Sarasota, Florida, you might know Frank. He's still in the business. And we got to pilot, Fannie Mae Desktop. And so that was we got our first laptops because prior to that, you really didn't have a need for even computers. We barely had computers in the office. Everything was carbon copies. So you're too young to remember the card.
The fax machine and all of that, waiting for the deal to come in off of the fax machine. Yeah. So Let's talk a little bit. We're on the FinTech Hunting Podcast. Let's talk about how technology has evolved, especially as it relates to the loan officer. What are some of the tools? What are some of the things that are most important for them to use to be successful in today's market?
Well, I think, first and foremost in my mindset is a really good database. You've got to have, whether you're using salesforce.com or DataMine or some other tool that allows you to keep in constant contact with that client. I think that, and that's been the case for 25 years, right? Since the early 2000s, that's been a very integral part of the business. What I've seen really grow, and I'm sure you're seeing this too in the last 5 years, is maybe a little bit longer, being active on social media. You know that I have a daughter that's very active on social media and has taught me some of the tricks and tips. But we constantly have conversation around there's a difference in being an influencer and an originator. And at the end of the day, the reason to be active isn't just so people know who you are, it's so they take action to do business with you. And I think we're all still really trying to learn how to get from activity to action. But I think we're well on our way.
Well, and I absolutely love that because I think it's important. One, you've got to share educational information. And I think the borrower is looking for this information much earlier in the process before they ever reach out to a loan officer in today's environment. So, as you mentioned, social media, a lot of it is how do you educate it? And you mentioned Allie, and so I'm going to ask a bunch of questions as it relates to having kids in the business, and we'll come back to that. But I had Allie on the show a number of months ago. And I remember this discussion like it was yesterday, because I have daughters that are roughly the same age. They're actually sandwiched between her.
Okay.
And she was mentioning that you guys were getting ready for a European trip and you were researching things to do, how I probably would research it. I'm on Google and I'm looking and all of that. And she's like, well, Michael, I mean, my friend and I were on TikTok and we're watching what people are doing and we're using TikTok. And that's how they got information to go to excursions and to do different things. So how, as people in our age, and how do you adapt to those different tools for what today's borrower is looking for and where they're at on social?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. You have to anticipate what others are doing. So I love what you were referencing. That was about a year ago. So Allie was on the podcast about a year ago. And it's true. My first gut reaction was to call American Express Travel, right? Because that's where I have all my points. And
Right.
so I get on the phone with American Express Travel and start to get an agenda drawn out. And she looks at me like I have three heads. And she's like, what do they know about what's going on in Barcelona? And I'm like, so you're right. I ended up letting the 20 somethings in our lives and in our trip plan the trip, and it was amazing. I discovered things like if you haven't ever used the app, Get Your Guide. It was
Okay.
amazing all over Europe, in Greece, Barcelona. We were in parts of Italy, and everywhere. Get Your Guide were local tour guides that gave you like these amazing adventures, local adventures. And they learned about it on TikTok. I would have never known about it,
And
right?
I just chuckle like my daughters were home for Christmas and I was getting ready for a call and I'm like, hey, we're just going to order some pizza tonight. Here's the place I want you to order it from. Well, that place didn't have an app. They couldn't order it online. They didn't use that pizza place. They weren't going to call. They weren't going to talk to someone. They grabbed their phone. They ordered from somewhere else. And so the reason I bring that up is as we talk about new technologies and social, we have to go to where the borrowers are at and where the borrowers are getting information. And that's why I shared it. So, what's it like having kids in the business?
Well, first of all, let me back up and say about the pizza app. One of the things I've learned with my kids in the app process is they won't order pizza if there's not a tracker. So they don't just want the app, they want a tracker,
Because I
right?
want to know if it's going to be here in 30 minutes or 32 minutes or 22 minutes.
Right. And it reminded me of like when I'm using Uber, I'm constantly looking to see where my car
Are they
is.
here? Are they here? Yep.
Right. Are they lost? Do I need to cancel and start over? And I thought about that, and I don't know how many mortgage companies, I've been in the four walls of a big bank for about 7 years. I don't know how many mortgage companies out there have a good tracker
For a
for.
loan status and those updates of exactly what stage is my loan in. But that's an excellent point of that's how people are conditioned. I always say it's like the Amazon effect. If I
Right.
order a book at 9 this morning, by like 2 or 3, I'm expecting to get it. And if I don't, I'm kind of pissed off that I didn't get it today.
Or you're looking at your app to see when you can expect it to
Right?
be
Oh, they
delivered.
still got 9 more stops. Okay, there's only 2 more stops.
Right. And I think that in the future, that's going to be expected. And I think there are companies out there dabbling with it. I don't know who they are. I would be very interested to know who they are because I think that's going to be something that can truly add value to the client. And when you have tools like that, then it goes back to letting your originator truly
Right,
sell
and
the
foster
relationship.
and grow that relationship
Yes,
and not worry about a lot of the manual redundant tasks. All right, we're
exactly.
going to come back to Allie in a second. I have another question I want to ask you.
Okay,
But
okay.
I've seen you now leaning in more and you're now starting to do videos. You're using social more. Kind of tell me what prompted that. And I can't congratulate you enough. I'm so glad that you're doing it and leaning in, but kind of what inspired you to do that?
Okay, so thank you for asking, but more importantly, thank you for noticing. I oh, I have to be honest, being in the business for 35 years, I would love to tell you that I'm humble, but I'm not. I'm competitive. And
Can relate.
when my children started outpacing me, I got this sense of panic. Like, oh crap, they are ahead of me. They're going to get ahead of me. Oh shit. What? I got to catch up. I got to stay one step ahead of them because now that they're in their 20s and they're getting in our business, they're moving at such a fast pace. And the truth is the adults in my life, the 50 somethings that I've
Yep.
worked with for 30 plus years, the majority of them are not moving at the same pace that my children are moving, and it both lit a fire under my ass and also got me excited. And and so the excitement has really got me moving forward. Now it's still nerve-wracking. Like, I'm sure when I go back and look at the video of you and I speaking, I'm gonna not like my voice, not like my hair, like a million things is still uncomfortable for me. But watching the kids do it and then seeing that they're still a little uncomfortable, but they look great and it's fine, has helped me just go, okay, I can do this too.
And what I have found is they don't need to be perfect. I'm a big believer in one takes because I think they're more genuine and authentic. And if you said once, or if the UPS guy knocked on the door, the FedEx guy knocked on the door, there was a dog that barked.
Yeah.
That's life, and that's the reality of us working in the mortgage industry now. So tell me, how is it having a daughter in the industry?
So it has been so wonderful. Growing up, she hated me working all the time. I would pick her up from school, and the deal in our house was you only get to sit in the front seat if you agree to be the sales assistant. So if you pick them up from school, you get a yellow pad and a pen on the speakerphone on the car. All my voicemails are playing. Write down the loan number, write down the loan level scenario, and we're going to fix it before we end our day. Right. And so she was involved in all that. And she would get really like, "Ugh, Mom, I hate this. I'm never going to be in the mortgage business. These people are cranky, blah, 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 blah. And so growing up all through college, she got really attached to FinTech. Her first job was with Oracle right out of college. She really likes the technology aspect of things, and wasn't going to be in the mortgage business. Turn of events, things happened, and she really learned that, and I say learned, I think she came to the realization that home ownership is the root of generational wealth. And she saw so many of her friends buy brand new cars out of college, and that's where their wealth went. And she saw things happening around her, and being raised in a mortgage environment, the bells and whistles went off like, Mom, they've got to save for a house. Mom, don't they know with an FHA they can put 3% down? I'm like, yeah, honey, why don't you go tell them? Right? Like,
And she has told the industry, and she's carved out a wonderful niche for sharing that generation. And so as we talk generations, and Denise, you and I could talk for hours. You are welcome back anytime. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. But what the question I want to end with is, as we talk about generations, for those 50 plus that are still in the industry, but are scared to get on video or scared to get on social, what are a couple of tips or best practices that you would share with them to encourage them that they need to dive in and lean in?
you know what I would love to see in our industry is I would love to see, this is going to sound weird, but the buddy program. Do you remember the old days? If you went to camp, it said pick your buddy and stick with them until the end. Like,
Yep.
you were responsible for them and they're responsible for you.
And kind of that accountability, and you're watching out for each other.
But I think my generation needs to do is they need to pick a buddy that's under the age of 30. And so we've got seasoned vets that remember the crash. They
Yep.
remember what it was like to deal with a ton of refis and 90-day, 120-day turn times. But they also remember when there's no refis and you've got to hit the streets and find purchases, right? Like if you've been in the business over 20 years, you've been through a couple of cycles that you
Exactly.
could really teach the younger generation, not only product knowledge, sales knowledge, but industry knowledge. And that younger generation could really teach you and push you into the new wave of technology and the new part of the industry.
Social media, the videos on, I mean, my first reaction isn't to grab my phone and videotape something while it's happening, but the kids are always on it. They're doing it. It's intuitive to them.
Yes.
This has been delightful. One last thing I want to end with is people want to find out more about you. They want to find out more about your business, your loan programs, and how you could potentially help them. What's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me is probably by email, and I'm going to spell it out for you. It's Denese with 3 E's. I always say it's the redneck way to spell Denise. It's Denese. I'm from Jacksonville. Denese.m.Carty, Carty at chase.com. That's the best way to get me. Or you can
Oh,
find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn.
excellent. Well, if you guys are not following Denise, please follow her on LinkedIn. She has so much to share with us. Denise, thank you so much for being a guest on this episode of the FinTech Hunting Podcast.
Thank you.